Hello and welcome back to the Student StarCraft AI Tournament. This is Nightcat, your host for this week's cast. And for the first game here, I thought we'd go ahead and take a look at QuesoBot, taking a look at the more recently updated bots through the past week, up against Redrum, which is down in the bottom right corner here of Jade, as the orange Terran. Sorry, it looked brown when I was this zoomed out to me for a moment there. Redrum is actually a bot that I'm not that familiar with. Looks like it was last updated in May of 2019, and there's no description for it on the SSCAIT website, so I'm curious to see what it will be up to in this game. Seems to be doing a pretty standard strategy here, getting the barracks and the gas, similar to, although a little bit faster than QuesoBot is. And it looks like both are scouting, and QuesoBot has found Redrum, and now Redrum has found QuesoBot. So we're seeing factories from both, so we're going to see some mech play. Looks like very similar strategies coming out here, though we did have a Vulture out now for Redrum, which we don't see for QuesoBot yet. And the Marines are being led out, which is probably not, gonna end well, especially they ended up on engaging on low ground against high ground. QuesoBot is replacing the Marines, but is not getting anything out of the factory, so this might just be a quick win for Redrum here, depending on what we see come out of QuesoBot here. Now this is something that you tend to see with bots, because it's something to account for is having reactions. So for instance, it looks like QuesoBot may have been going for some sort of two factory play perhaps, but it was strange to see the no machine shop on any of the factories. Because if you were going to go for like two factories, one with maybe tanks and then one to pump out vultures, you'd want to see a machine shop on this one while your second one is building maybe, or at least one vulture come out before you do that. But GG to Redrum there with the early aggression and also expanding behind that aggression. Unfortunate to see QuesoBot not getting the vulture to defend itself as soon as it saw, oh, I'm getting hit with that early aggression. But GG, a quick first game. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. For game number 2 this week, we have Howupon up against SkyForkNet on the map Moonglaive. So another, I believe the tile set is Twilight, and it looks like we're going to have a bit of a proxy play from Howupon here. So that will be pretty fun to check out here and see how it plays out. Howupon, another bot that was more recently updated this past week. Looks like it scouted the other main. Moonglaive is a 3-player map, so you can get away with knowing where your opponent is with only scouting one base, instead of the 0 bases you need to scout for a 2-player map, and the at most 2 bases you would need to scout for a 4-player map. So it looks like Howupon is trying to not let the opponent know exactly that a proxy is going on, but now the Marines have been discovered by a probe, and they're going to move in along with a couple of SCVs here. Probably going to see a bunker get thrown down. Yep, and there's the bunker. Marines are just going to go ahead and fire away at the probes. Seemingly no reaction from SkyForkNet. No zealots being made despite floating 500 minerals. And a very quick win for Howupon there with the proxy play. Always fun to see the fun little cheesy early aggression. And as you can see, oftentimes bots struggle a lot with that because it will throw off what their game plan was. And like we kind of saw in the previous game, where no vulture was built to defend itself against vultures. In this case, no military was built at all to defend itself against the early aggression. So well played by Howupon there. So for our third game this week, we have NuiBot, the bot that was updated this week, against BetaStar, whose last update was prior to last year's tournament. So I'm excited to see what improvements we might see out of NuiBot. Looks like it is still going to go for a 5-pull here. And this is again on Jade, which is the 4-player map of the Twilight tile set. And watch, I'm wrong, and the name isn't actually Twilight, it's something else. And then everyone will be correcting me on that. Yeah. So we have BetaStar here going for pretty standard. Looks like fast expansion here. Pretty far back pylon, getting its forge, since it doesn't know what the opponent is up to just yet. Which is a good safe play to do here. Given it's a larger map, it's harder to find your opponent in time to know what they're going to be throwing at you. And the 4-pull finishes. Since this is looking like a 4-pull, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit more. So the Zerglings are out. But they are waiting for their numbers. Really should be moving out with them. There we go. Looks like they're going to go cross map, which they're going to luck out here. Not sure why all of those. I guess maybe they were preparing for the Zerglings to come in, but at this point the cannons are finished. And so I suspect this is just going to be a slowly throw my Zerglings at the enemy cannons until the enemy decides to come kill me game. Oh, wait, there is a transition happening. So we are transitioning out of the 4-pull. That is great to see. And we're getting a creep colony pretty far back. Not able to defend much. The hatchery and the spawning pool are pretty well exposed there. Like the zealot placement by BetaStar here. Making sure that nothing can just go ahead and run through and try to just get past the cannons or even get to the cannons to damage them. Pretty expensive drone scout there. Drones are a valuable commodity for Zerg, since they have to choose between building economy or military. And BetaStar moving across the map, this should probably be a kill move here. Given that NuiBot really doesn't have much. So it was trying to transition to Hydralisks. But yeah, going 4-pull and 4-pull not succeeding really puts you at a disadvantage. I think most of the games I've seen from NuiBot, it's gone 4-pull and then transitioned out. So I would love to see it start off with the transition that it's transitioning to, instead of just 4-pulling and then transitioning into it, because I think that 4-pull is really hurting it. But good game there. I want to say, I can't remember if last week when I think it was NuiBot I watched when it tried to transition out, it just ended up not doing anything. So great to see, you know, that it did start to produce Hydralisks there, just not in time due to the 4-pull. And then BetaStar is a very strong opponent to be up against, and is not going to waste time. As soon as it feels comfortable to come over and kill you, it is going to do so. So good attempt there though by NuiBot. So for our next game, we have BrianWeber updated this week, up against MadMixP down in the bottom right here of Circuit Breaker, which was last updated at the end of March, so not that long ago. Both bots pretty recently updated, well, particularly BrianWeber being this week updated. We have a ZVP here on a pretty decent map. So Circuit Breaker, I think I remember hearing someone say, is kind of like a more modern Fighting Spirit in terms of popularity. And I could be completely wrong, but on that in general, but I believe I heard somebody say that at some point. And I think it's got a pretty good layout where you've got your main along with your lower ground natural that is relatively easy to defend, although a pretty wide choke point. Along with a mineral-only third, not that far away, with a wider defensive position and not quite as much of a choke point there. And then you've got bases in between the naturals on each side. Pardon me, on each side of the map. So it's a pretty good map. Pretty fun to play on. We already have an engagement going on here. Looks like BrianWeber is doing a one-hatch lair play. Was able to take out one of the zealots there. So MadMixP, we're going to go ahead and zoom in a bit here to get a better look at this. MadMixP does have 2 zealots out on the field now, should be able to repel this. Took a little bit of damage here. That pylon could be finished off, yep, by that Zergling that was left behind, but the zealots are chasing, and now we have another zealot on the field and more on the way. So, and MixP being able to push this back. Go ahead and zoom out a little bit more here. And now Hydralisks are out on the field, which is what I would expect to see with a one-hatch play. I don't see Lurker aspect being researched, or the other upgrades for the Hydralisk. But depending on their kiting, it's interesting that they're all running away instead of ones that aren't being targeted firing while the ones that are being targeted backing off. But this force is large enough to make the zealots decide to not throw themselves at it. So they're going to go ahead and back off, although their vision, it leaves something to be desired, because the Zerg force is just kind of squeaking past here. Although now he sees it with this zealot here. And these 4 zealots are just going to hang back. Now they might be hanging back to counter, but you might actually need them for this engagement here. Okay, and now they are going to come back, although that is going to sandwich up. Nope, they're just going to run through, which is going to be unfortunate unit loss there that really could have been saved. So now we are seeing Lurker aspect, Zergling speed, faster Overlord movement, which will be good in case Dark Templar come out. But really from MadMixP, at least at this point, we aren't really seeing any teching. We're just kind of seeing straight pumping of zealots off of 4 gateways, while still producing probes. This base is really oversaturated. Another pylon down for what I am assuming is power. Now there was an engagement here that I missed a bit as the zealots moved out. We do have a Lurker morphing, which really this Lurker, well, it's going to be pressured now. The Zerg army has kind of abandoned it, so I think it's going to actually just die mid-spawning. But there is another Lurker now on the field up here, which MadMixP has no detection for. MadMixP is expanding. Okay, the Lurker was able to spawn and chase these zealots back. I don't believe that MadMixP even has a forge. Taking a look, I don't see one. One has just started now. So the window of opportunity for BrianWeber to be aggressive with these Lurkers, uncontested, is slowly dying. Now, they do have to kind of march forward slowly, because while they are up, they are exposed, and there are enough zealots that if they got enough contact on the Lurkers, especially the very hurt Lurker, they could be taken out very quickly. But the Lurkers are marching forward to the natural here, and are going to get some damage done, because with the forge you have to build the cannons. So it looks like we are getting some cannons being built, but some space is going to be lost here before the cannons finish. Yeah, and this is going to set up a nice contain here for BrianWeber. Really, those zealots are just being very indecisive on what to do. Hopefully for MadMixP's sake, we'll see some teching up to observers here, because at this point now, if MadMixP wants to leave its space, it's going to need mobile detection. Trying to get the cannons more forwardly placed, which is a little bit awkward to see. This cannon is obviously exposed, but it looks like that was a pylon. Actually, yeah, that would be a little bit too far. Looks like it's trying to rebuild those supply pylons out here. Yeah. Which is going to be unfortunate because it's close to that supply gap. Oh, we do have an observatory coming down now, though, so that's good. And +1. We have a Hydralisk defense coming up. Let's just go ahead and take a look here. and see, okay, we're still at 0-0. And now MadMixP's army is coming out. But I don't see an observer on the field just yet. There is one under construction though. So kind of threw away some zealots there prior to the detection coming out. But now with the observer out, MadMixP should be able to move out. There is a front-facing hatchery here, but normally you might see a few more buildings out at the choke point to sort of act just as a... making the choke point a little bit thinner for Protoss and making Protoss have to work through those chunky buildings while you quickly build your defenses with units. So now MadMixP is going to move into the natural here to engage. Going to do some damage to this natural. Yeah, it looks like once that mobile detection with the observer was achieved, it was the game for BrianWeber, with BrianWeber tapping out here at the end. So good attempt by BrianWeber. I liked seeing the one hatch play into the lurkers. It was a lot of fun to see. Unfortunately, just couldn't be too aggressive with them. MadMixP was good at delaying them until it could get its forge up and a few cannons to protect itself. A good game overall to watch from both bots. A lot of unit deaths that weren't really necessary for MadMixP, but overall it was still enough to win the game. For our next game, we have two bots that were updated this week. We have McRaveZ down here in the bottom right of, again, Moonglaive as the blue Zerg, and Banana Brain, the brown Protoss, in the top mid of Moonglaive. Banana Brain, rather, placed third, if I'm remembering properly, in the tournament this past year. So it's great to see that the bot is still being actively updated. Some bots you will see only get updated right around tournament time, which is a viable strategy to do. Some bots, some authors believe, that they don't want to tip their hand through the year on what they're working on, so that their opponents can get the upper hand on them. Although usually you'll see that more as the tournaments get closer. You'll see a slowdown in updates for a number of bots. So now we have the quick Zerglings coming out here from McRaveZ to poke in and see what's happening. They see the very exposed cannon, the very exposed forge out there, but it is covered at least by one cannon, so they're not going to be able to take it down. You also have a gateway coming down now, and lair and hatchery coming down for Brave, or rather, I think that hatchery was the natural, so we just have the lair coming down. Probably, I'm expecting to see some Mutalisks come out. And let's see what Banana Brain is going to go for. The natural Nexus is done. The first Zealot is out, going to make the scouting Zerglings back up just a little bit. Now that the Cybernetics core is done, I'm wondering if we will see a starport from Banana Brain and get some Corsair action going on. Meanwhile, we do have the Spire under construction from McRaveZ here. Zealot just chilling out with the Zerglings. They're best buds. Dragoon is finished. And we have actually an explosion of gateways happening in the main now. 4 of them coming down to bring the gateway count up to 5. So it looks like we're going to see a strong ground push come out of this. Meanwhile, the Spire is finished. We have one Mutalisk on the way. I'm gonna just pause this really quick because I want to take a look. So we've got three larvae, 1 larva. What's this become? That's the morphing Mutalisk, and then we've got Overlord and Overlord. So we had a bit of a supply block here, which is unfortunate to see. What you really want to see is what we're seeing now, this high number of Mutalisks being finished. But you want to see that right when the Spire completes, to have a real effect or impact on it. Like, hey, here are my Mutalisks, and there's many of them. Deal with that. But now the Mutalisks are out on play, if not just a little bit late. But now that they're in the main and causing some damage, Banana Brain trying to get some cannons out. The Mutalisks focusing on the probes. Could take out this cannon before it finishes, and they do force the cancel, I believe. The starport is now, or Stargate rather, is now finished. So Corsair's production could begin if Banana Brain is able to get the money for it. Working on cannons and I believe a pylon there. So able to force the Mutalisks out with the high Dragoon numbers. But Mutalisks sort of have the advantage of mobility in that they don't have to worry about cliffs and actually following the layout of the terrain. So they could have probably bounced this Dragoon army back and forth from natural to main, but the Dragoon army feeling strong enough that they're going to go ahead and push. A couple of creep colonies here that don't quite have the money to morph. Trying to morph them now, but maybe a little bit too late. Bringing the Mutalisks into the main to try and deal some damage, but Banana Brain's going to keep this Dragoon army committed to the attack, which I think is the smart move here. I feel like you're going to be able to, with your cannon count and with your unit production, be able to hold off these Mutalisks, whereas the Zerg is going to struggle a lot more to deal with your ground army here. And if you're able to take out this natural while staying alive, that's going to put you ahead tremendously. And I think that's what we're seeing play out here. Now the Mutalisks are busy being worried. There we go. Now they're kind of committing to the attack. So they were bouncing, trying to stay out of range of this Corsair. Instead of just engaging with it, they could kill it, I believe, especially if they spread out. But they're just kind of letting this Corsair push them back. And I don't know what these drones are doing over here. Just kind of having a weird party, it looks like. Maybe they think they are Zerglings, and the Zerglings seem to think that they are drones? Almost makes me wonder if this game desynced or something, because... Okay, no, there we go. Okay, this didn't desync. Those drones were just doing something weird. Well, the Zerglings were there, I guess, to guard them, but they weren't there. But we do have here Banana Brain coming in to clean up the main now. So good attempt by McRaveZ. A little bit of misfiring there with the supply block. I think made the impact of the Mutalisks a little less than they could have been. Maybe could have made to force that Dragoon army to stay at home a little bit more by threatening the main when the Dragoon army was first trying to move out. But then when you don't see the Dragoon army come in and it's at your natural, you really need to pull those Mutalisks back. So good game though by Banana Brain, deciding that it didn't need to pull its army back when it was taking out the natural, and that was more important. Which is another thing that you'll see bots struggle with sometimes, is just prioritizing what they should be doing in that moment. So good game here overall from both bots. And so for our next game here, we have the recently updated Purple Destiny, which is Purple Wave playing random. This game spawning as Zerg, up against an old bot from 2013, Jakub Transik. So this should be a fun game to watch. Let's go ahead and speed up the beginning a little bit here. So random is an interesting race to play. Oftentimes it is banned from tournaments, mainly because it confers a pretty large advantage to the player, although that is sometimes hotly debated on if it actually gives you an advantage or not. The argument for it giving an advantage is more so just that not knowing the race of your opponent really hampers the amount of truly viable openings that you can do without that piece of information. Jakub, though, being a pretty old bot, I think is pretty set in how it operates. But it'll still be fun to see you know, a random bot, because there's not that many of them on the ladder. Developing a bot for all of the races can be a little bit tricky. having to have build orders for not just against every race, but also while being every race against every race increases the amount of work that you have to do, as well as having to handle all of the cases for all of the races. So it looks like Jakub is going for mass cannons inside of its own base, which is interesting to see. These Zerglings should be able to do some damage, but at least a couple of the cannons should finish. Jakub will lose a few probes, but ultimately should survive this. And it looks like he does. So, Purple Destiny is going to go ahead and expand to his natural and start getting a lair behind this. We might see maybe some lurker tech come out of this. Meanwhile, Jakub is going to rebuild the probes that it lost. Feeling a bit safer on these 4 cannons, going to get a 5th cannon. Perhaps to try and push the Zerglings back a little bit further. Get a little bit more real estate to be able to build off of. Lair is still underway, just finishes up here, and we see some more Zerglings being made. Waiting to see what building gets placed on, and it is a spire, not a den, so we will see some Mutalisks come out to play. And Zerglings committing there because they were able to take out a probe, but ultimately the Zerglings being cleaned up and then replaced with a few more. So actually, Jakub, if I remember right, is a, I think that's a cannon rusher. So that might be why we are seeing the cannons in base, since it wasn't able to find its opponent in time to actually cannon rush. Now the spire has finished. Wait, oh, and as well as a den at the same time. I missed that. So now we actually have, which I can't select because it is so far down on the zoomed out view. But now we have Hydralisks finishing up, which is actually the better move here than Mutalisks with this number of cannons. Jakub eventually should get something other than cannons, but by then it's probably going to be too late. But we'll see as the Zerg swarm slowly builds up here. And the Zerg army just kind of builds up here. I'm just listening to the warping sounds here of the cannons. And just waiting for the Zerg swarm to mass up enough to move in. Now we do have Mutalisks in the mix here. Very high number of cannons. Ridiculously high number. Meanwhile, Purple Destiny is taking over the map here. This is just interesting to see a huge number of cannons. Usually Jakub will get a gateway at some point, but he's just not doing it. And then I think the game actually timed out due to unit kills. And honestly, I'm not sure who would have won this game with the timeout happening there. Let me go back a little bit. Just to try and see here. Yeah, because a fair number of units were lost here in that exchange. And then I think for like the next 5-ish minutes there were no kills. I know there were some kills there. And then it stopped. So actually, I'm not sure how this game ended. This one really could have gone for either player. And I don't think there's a good way that I can actually check who won this, since this was just a ladder game. So, pretty interesting there, how it never transitioned out of the cannons, and just continued to get more and more of them. Which usually, like I said, Jakub will eventually get a gateway and such, but looks like this game, I'm not sure why this ended prematurely. Probably would have eventually gone for Purple Destiny, but really with where this game ended, either bot could have walked away with the win here. So let's go ahead and move on to another game. So for our last game this week, we have SSCAIT, which was updated this week as well, up against NuiBot down here in the bottom right of La Mancha. So finally we have a little bit of color in our map, red map this time instead of the space or twilight that we've been seeing for the rest of this week. Now let's see what SSCAIT is going to get up to in this game. Going with the cross map Overlord Scout, so it will find NuiBot, getting its, I believe that was a 9 pull. Nice and quick, and going for the second hatchery here in its natural. And then just popping out 2 Zerglings to go ahead and scout the enemy and see what they're up to. Meanwhile, NuiBot's SCV is out scouting and has found the enemy base, and now the Zerglings are going to come back and try to deal with the scout here, going around the main, just gathering some information, going ahead and getting a 3rd hatchery now. Meanwhile, NuiBot behind this got 2 Raxes. The Overlord has found the base, bunker placed pretty defensively within the buildings, getting its academy, sitting on 1 base. So SSCAIT is free to go ahead and take a 3rd expansion, or rather a 2nd expansion, although that can be pretty risky given that NuiBot is on 1 base, could be producing a large push out, which if you're a little bit too spread could be dangerous, although we do have the Hydralisk then out. There is no lair that I can see getting grooved spines, so lurkers could have, quick lurkers could have been a problem. Looks like the Marines are going out. 2 of them got a little bit isolated there and picked off, but now we do have medics amidst the Marines, which appear to be pulling back due to the Overlord, which is causing some problems for them here as they get separated, and Hydralisks able to pick some of them off, but then ultimately the reinforcements seem like they are able to handle the situation, although taking more losses than really they should have. And I don't know what the medic over here is doing dancing. But behind the SSCAIT is getting a 4th expansion now, just kind of streaming units in. Marines just standing there, meeting their death. This medic is still freaking out. The natural now is being denied by the Hydralisks. But a tank is out now, and they might actually be able to push this back depending. But it doesn't look like 1 lone tank is going to be able to deal with these Hydralisks. Very nice walk up there to try and get closer to the tank to get within its minimum range. And it looks like at this point, the Zerg Swarm just streaming in the Hydralisk is going to be too much to handle here. The Academy goes down, although now being forced to back out because the bunker is there and loaded, as we can see. Go ahead and zoom in. We can watch this a little more with our overlay. Going for the SCVs now. This game is basically over in SSCAIT's favor. It's just a matter of time now. Streaming in the power needed to clean this up, as NuiBot is now out of resources. It's a little bit untraditional play there by SSCAIT, going with just Hydralisks, but in the end it was enough to overpower the Marines, which let themselves get out of position a couple of different times and be picked off in numbers where they really shouldn't have been able to have that happen. So a good game by SSCAIT. Thank you for watching this week's cast, and we hope to see you next week. Stay safe, everyone.